This is a short video about the UK's post-Brexit trade agreements, where I'm going to try to answer two questions. First, what's the current state of play a year after the end of the Brexit transition period? And second, how important are trade agreements for most businesses, and how much attention should you be paying to them, given everything else that you need to keep an eye on? Let's start with the current state of play. The first point to make is that the UK government has done a commendable job of putting in place what are generally known as continuity trade agreements. The effect of these is largely to maintain the benefits of most of the trade agreements with non-EU countries that we were party to as a member state of the EU, and that covers over 60 territories worldwide. There have also been several new post-Brexit trade deals. An agreement with Japan is already in force, and although it's broadly similar to the EU's, there are some differences in coverage which are potentially to the benefit of UK businesses. A deal has recently been signed with Australia. An agreement in principle has been reached with New Zealand. And the UK has also signed a digital economy agreement with Singapore. So with those last three countries in particular, the UK can legitimately claim to be a little bit ahead of where the EU currently is. So overall, a lot of activity and some significant achievements. And in terms of prospects for new deals, the government's stated priorities include expanding the existing continuity agreements with Canada and Mexico, joining the Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership, and reaching a trade deal with the US, although it seems that this isn't a top priority for the current US administration, so progress there may be limited. If you want to check on the current state of play, you might be interested in our interactive map of the UK's trade agreements. To get more information, you simply click on the country you're interested in, and you can find out whether there's a trade agreement, whether it's in force, or what the state of play is on any negotiations. We'll provide the link at the end of the video. But to turn to my second question, how much difference does all this really make to UK businesses? Well, here I think there is a bit of a gap between some of the political rhetoric and the economic reality. Most economists would argue that if Brexit is going to be worth it in the long term, the benefits of the UK's trade deals need to outweigh the costs of having a more distant trade relationship with the EU. And the problem is that the government's own impact assessments of most of its deals so far project only a limited positive impact on overall UK GDP. That's partly because countries tend to trade more with their immediate neighbours, and many of the territories the UK has been negotiating with are geographically distant from the UK. It may also be because, in the main, trade agreements aren't particularly effective at opening up significant new opportunities for services trade, which is where the UK is at its strongest. Now, that's not to say that trade agreements aren't worth doing, and it's good that the UK is being ambitious in this area. It's just that the benefits are not usually quite as transformational as some of the political rhetoric might suggest. So that's how we see the big picture. But what about the detail? How much attention should you be paying to that? Well, it depends very much what your business does. Now, there are lots of things that I could talk about here, but this is only meant to be a short video, so I'm just going to highlight three examples. Let's start with services, which account for over 70% of the UK economy. The services sector is often very people-oriented, and one area where trade agreements can sometimes help concerns your ability to send staff to an overseas territory to perform services there on a temporary basis. Those services could be anything from installing new software, providing on-site training, or acting as a tour guide for holidaymakers. Whilst these benefits probably won't be transformational, for some businesses, they will definitely be worth keeping an eye out for. Turning now to goods, many of you will be aware that trade agreements can help by reducing or removing tariffs. And one area that hasn't received much attention is the reduction in tariffs following the introduction of the UK's post-Brexit global tariff schedule on the 1st of January 2021. Now, strictly speaking, this isn't really a trade agreement. It's a unilateral step that the UK was able to take as a result of leaving the EU. But compared with the position when we were still in the EU, tariffs have been completely removed on about 2,000 products, which is about 1/6 of the total. So if you're involved in a goods supply chain, it's worth checking whether any of these reductions might benefit you or your suppliers. To help you with that, we've produced a report which breaks it down into sectors like food and drink, construction, manufacturing chemicals and plastics, and so on. For each of those sectors, we've highlighted the products which have seen the most substantial tariff reductions, and we'll give you a link to our report at the end of the video. A third reason why it's worth paying attention to trade agreements is that they can sometimes have a disproportionate impact on particular sectors, including domestic supply chains. For example, if you're involved in the food sector, you may well be aware of concerns that UK farmers have about the UK-Australia deal, and in particular, how it could have an adverse impact on their commercial viability. It remains to be seen how far those concerns will prove to be justified, but if it's important to your business to have local sources of supply, it may be something that you want to follow more closely. I want to finish by going back to our webpage with the interactive map that I mentioned earlier, because we've produced a similar map of the UK's bilateral investment treaties. Now, these typically don't get as much attention as regular trade agreements, but for investors, they can be just as important. In particular, they allow investors to take action in their own right to protect an investment that they've made in the host state or to obtain compensation, as opposed to having to ask their own government to raise the matter on a state-to-state basis, which is normally your only option when it comes to regular trade agreements. So for businesses looking to invest outside the UK, but using a UK incorporated entity, it may be that these rather less well-known treaties are sometimes more helpful in practice than trade agreements covering goods or services. This is part of a series of short videos on different aspects of the UK's post-Brexit arrangements, so do check those out if you're interested. Links to the various briefings I've mentioned will appear at the end of the video. Thanks for listening.